The most dangerous sentence in real estate is, well, everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay. I've lost deals because I've refused to cross the line, but in the long run, I promise you, integrity will always win. There's actually a recent transaction that I just did. So let me tell you a story. I had an agent that I've known for years that literally stole a listing from me, and it ended up selling to a buyer that we generated, and she broke a code of ethics rule, and then the tables were actually flipped, and I was in the same position where I could have done the exact same thing to her. So what do you think I did? So let's zoom out for a second. In real estate, there's a rule where if a seller is under contract with an agent and that seller reaches out to another agent saying that they want to maybe make a switch or discuss alternative opportunities, that agent that receives that phone call, the only sentence out of their mouth should be, are you currently under contract with another agent? If the answer is yes, or they can see that online, is the only sentence out of their mouth should be, no problem at all. Once that contract expires, I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss my services. They cannot go over to that seller's house. They cannot give them pricing or marketing advice. It is a full stop. Now, to be honest with you, if I was going to put myself in the shoes of a consumer, I would want to have all the choices to talk to whoever I want. But if you actually look at the reason that the rule is formed, is the listing agent has a fiduciary duty to that seller to provide them pricing and marketing advice. And the first phone call that that seller should make is to the person that they are under contract with, to have an honest and transparent conversation with that person as to their efforts, pricing, so on and so forth. And obviously, if they can't come to a reasonable place, then that agent and that seller maybe aren't the right match. And that's totally fine. Not every agent's meant for every seller. Not every seller is meant for every agent. But the core of it, this is a black and white rule. So zooming back into this case study, I had a client that called me, wanted to achieve an aspirational price, and I consulted with them over and over and over. Easily had over 50 to 60 hours into this file. Did more for the seller than I can tell you would get anywhere else. But honestly, the seller was a bit of a time vampire, and I was getting to the point where I didn't want to renew the contract regardless. Also, throughout the course of the listing, I actually sold it, and then I advised my clients on the risk of them making a decision in the negotiation that I thought wasn't in their best interest. They didn't listen to me. That contract died, so they were potentially looking for a scapegoat, which is totally fine. Now, that said, let's zoom back in to discuss what did that agent do that was so ethically wrong. So the listing was coming up to the end of the term and actually expired on midnight on a Tuesday. The weekend before, we still invested time and resources, did an open house, our marketing generated interest, a buyer came to the property, and their agent actually reached out to me. By then, we actually booked a showing. I was discussing booking the showing with my client, and we were setting it for Friday of that day. On Wednesday morning at, I think it was 6 a.m., maybe it was 8 a.m., I get a message from this other agent indicating that she has the listing and she'd be happy to accommodate booking the showing. I was flabbergasted, because unless she went to that client's house at midnight and had a 2-hour meeting with them about listing that property, she was engaged in what's called tortious interference in a contract. She clearly would have been having conversations with my seller while we were under contract. And I was flabbergasted, to be honest with you, because this person's somebody I've known for a very long time. And I thought it wouldn't cross that boundary. But I took the call and I realized that this is how this person conducts business. And it's going to formulate how I engage with them in the future if that's the rule set that they play by. Now, fast forward, there's something called the holdover period. Not sure if she discussed that with that seller. But regardless, I'm actually happy that the house sold and this family gets to move on. Honestly, their loss, I think I could have still done a better job. And I'm still happy knowing that I'm the one that sold that property, even if she still gets credit for it. No factor. Here's where the story gets absolutely crazy. Is about 30 days later, I get a phone call from a seller that this agent has a property listed with. And the seller says, hey, really unhappy with their services, and I'd like to discuss an alternative. If you were in my shoes, jump in the comments and tell me what you would have done. Would you have driven over to that seller's house, told them how good you were at pricing, marketing, negotiations, showed you the track record and what you did, and show them how much higher level you were than that other person, and even dig into that scenario and explain how you generated the buyer that sold that house? I had that opportunity. And you know what I said to the seller? I said to that seller, hey, Mr. Seller, thank you so much for reaching out to me. Given you're under contract with another agent, I actually can't engage in any further conversation relating to your listing because you have a contract in place. I would encourage you to discuss it with your agents and see if you can come to some sort of reasonable place and continue that contract. And if for some reason it expires, feel free to reach out to me after the expiry and I'd be happy to come over. I explained to him that it would be a breach in the Code of Ethics for me to interfere in that contract, even though that agent literally just did it to me. And guess what? They actually continued their contract with that agent, and I can put my head on my pillow at night knowing I made the right decision. Now, fast forward 60 days later, exact same conversation with another seller. I said the exact same thing, and they're not going to continue the conversation with that agent because he said something to me that really highlighted this whole conversation. is if you know it's a breach of code of ethics to go over to somebody's house and have a conversation with them who's currently under contract with another agent, and let's pretend you're the actual seller. Would you prefer an agent who is ethical over somebody who is willing to breach the contract before even having your business? And the reason that I ask you this question is if they're that willing to throw the code of ethics under the bus before they are even signed up with you, what do you think they're going to do when they're in negotiations? Do you think that they're going to represent your best interests? And like I said in the beginning of the video, not every agent is for every client, and not every client is for every agent. Ethical clients typically want to work with ethical agents. And people who want it cheap and fast and don't care who bends the rules, I'm probably not their person. Now, if you're watching this video, you're likely a real estate agent or an entrepreneur. And the whole point of what I'm sharing is how you do one thing is how you do everything. If I had made the decision because that seller reached out to me, I could blur the lines and it was a gray area and it was okay for me to go over to their house. What's the next thing I'm going to convince myself of? And this translates to every aspect of your life. In our industry, it is absolutely rampant. The amount of times I've heard in this industry, well, everybody does it, so it's okay, makes me want to vomit. There's actually a proverb that speaks to this, and it says, do not let your heart envy sinners. That agent may be patting herself on the back because she got a singular sale and she thinks she won a battle. But I can promise you, when I step back and I look at our business, our network, what our name actually means in the industry, and how we've treated people long term, we're not even on the same planet. She may think she's a competitor to me. I don't even look at her as being in the same business as us, to be quite honest with you. And to the client, I'm actually super happy that they sold the house and that they've been able to move on with their life. I'm happy that I was able to generate a client to get them there. Will I get credit for it publicly? Probably not. Do I care? Not at all, because I know the big guy upstairs knows how I handled that situation. I know my wife knows how I handled the situation, and I know my daughter knows that story as well too. And I can think of the impact that that's going to have on her long term. I've seen agents get very creative on commission structures with team members to think that they deserve more on a transaction than they actually do. I've seen them literally steal money, steal data, steal clients. And rather than getting upset, I just step back and I think, oh, isn't that interesting? Aren't we all the heroes of our own story? And it's incredible what you can convince yourself of when you tell yourself, well, everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay.